First of all, thank you very much again for joining us and for your interest in the conference. First of all, you can ask questions in the chat, and we would like to encourage you to do so during the entire event. Your opinion really matters to us, and we are planning to have a very interactive webinar today. I'd also like to ask you, if you address a speaker directly, please don't forget to write his or her name, and also please share your affiliation with us. The recording will be available on the UNICA as well as on the Teach with Erasmus Plus website. And after the event, we will send you a satisfaction survey, and we would like to kindly ask you to share your opinion with us. And now I'll give the floor to Luciano Sazo, the president of UNICA Network, as well as Imre Hamar, vice rector for international relations at the Eötvös Loránd University. So the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vicky. Good morning to everyone. I'm Luciano Sazo, the president of UNICA. It is a great pleasure to welcome all of you to the conference Quality in Teaching Mobility, Challenges and Opportunities within the Erasmus Plus Key2 Teach with Erasmus project. I would like to thank, first of all, the coordinator of this project, Eötvös Loránd University, and the other partners of the project, University of Alcalá, Institut Polytechnique Unilassal, and European University Foundation. Just a couple of words about UNICA. UNICA is a network of universities. At the moment, we have 53 universities in 37 capital cities. We are based in Brussels, and we are very active in European projects in Erasmus Plus, but also in Horizon 2020 and very soon Horizon Europe scheme, hopefully. The topic of staff mobility is very important for UNICA. We initiated a few years ago the iMotion project, creating the staffmobility.eu platform, which is very much used today for staff members at European universities to find opportunities for mobility, such as staff weeks, job shadowing. And nowadays, we would like to encourage also universities to post opportunities for virtual mobility, because now after COVID, I think more and more also virtual possibilities for collaborations will be open. In terms of teaching mobility, I also believe that it's very important for European countries, European universities to be active in teaching mobility. I did that several times myself, and that was very beneficial for myself, for my students. We notice very often that when you do a high quality teaching mobility, very quickly, in 1 or 2 years, you have a very significant increase of student mobility. That's key, because students, will see teachers from another university teaching to them. They will start to look at that university, and it's also very important for other elements of student mobility, such as, for instance, learning agreement preparation. When a student, is looking at the exams and the possibility that he or she can do it at another university, I think it's very important, to have a professor who really visited that university, who was there, who has a concrete collaboration there. And of course, also for the recognition of the activities. Still, we have to say, under the Erasmus program, the recognition of the activities sometimes is still difficult. And again, teaching mobility can help a lot in the, improving the quality of student mobility itself. And again, in this new COVID era, unfortunately, we were facing several problems, but one of the good results we have to say is that we increased, the possibilities for virtual mobility for students, but also for staff. Nowadays, to organize a webinar, it's easier. So, when a professor would like to teach in another university, he or she can plan a physical mobility, but also why not start with a webinar and and get the other colleagues in that way. So I will not to take too much time at this moment. I want to thank very much, again, the coordinator of this project, and particularly Katalin Anna Nemet, the head of the Department of Erasmus Plus and International Programs of ELTE. I want to thank very much Professor Imre Hamar, the Vice Rector for International Affairs of ELTE. And I want to thank also very much the Commission, particularly Johannes Gehringer, the Policy Officer for Higher Education Unit in the European Commission, who will give very shortly a keynote speech. And then at the end, I want to thank also Professor Sorin Kostreje, Vice Rector for University Networks and Public Relations at the University of Bucharest, and also member of the UNICA Steering Committee. He will chair the last section of this meeting. Again, thank you very much to all the participants and to all the speakers of this event. And now I would like to leave the floor to Professor Amar, please.
Thank you very much. Dear participants, I would like to welcome you at the Online Quality Teaching Mobility Conference in the framework of the Teach with Erasmus Plus project. Teach with Erasmus Plus researches an important milestone with this conference today. Within the project, this is the first opportunity to present our achievements so far for a wider audience. Erasmus Plus teaching mobilities are the most common and accessible forms of mobility for university academic staff, and therefore they are an integral part of internationalization at our institution. At ELTE, we have a growing number of teachers participating in mobility each year. In the academic year of 2017-18, 227 members of the academic staff, while in 18-19, 329 members of the academic staff went to mobility. 17-18, we welcomed 294 academic staff members, and in 18-19, 202 academic staff members from 18 program countries. Although 2020 is a challenging year to conduct international mobility, there were 162 outgoing mobilities for academic staff during the last academic year. All of these teaching mobilities in recent years have brought a significant potential to a university. On the one hand, they contribute to the teacher's own professional growth. On the other hand, these experiences are integrated on the level of department and faculty and provide the whole university with new professional networks, strengthen our international presence, and last but not least, greatly stimulate student mobility. Our teachers during their mobility discover new scientific methods, build professional relationships, and have the chance to present their own achievements at other institutions for different academic circles. Both incoming and outgoing numbers are significantly rising, which shows the dedication of the teachers towards international mobility. However, the research that was conducted within the project uncovered the obstacles that occur for the academic staff. By participating in Teach with Erasmus Plus, ELTE expressed its commitment to enhancing the quality of teaching mobility, to tackle the known obstacles and give more recognition to teachers who participate in mobility. Teaching mobility is an integral part of our international and Erasmus Plus institutional strategies. We intend to facilitate the international involvement and networking of academic staff and strengthen the internationalization of education and research through supporting the current and former participants in mobility activities. Facilitate the knowledge transfer and dissemination of experiences. ELTE is member of UNICA since 1990 and EUF since 2018. The active participation in university network has been an integral part of our strategic goals, as these networks represent an essential part of exchanging information, good practices, and an outstanding opportunity for creating value through networking. They also allow increasing our visibility, joining research groups and other projects, and contributing to EU-level policy making. We at ELTE are honored to be a part of this project and together pioneering in this important development that creates the common platform for teaching mobilities in Europe, assisting all university citizens to achieve their highest potential. Finally, I would like to thank you once again for participating and wish you a very fruitful meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Imre. Now it is a great pleasure to leave the floor to Johannes Gehringer, Policy Officer of the Higher Education Unit of the European Commission, and he will give a keynote speech on the state of play of teaching mobility in Europe.
Good morning. I will first prepare my presentation. Please bear with me. I'm trying. Okay. So, good morning, dear colleagues. Thank you very much for inviting the Commission to present the state of play in this presentation on Erasmus Plus teaching mobility, but also teacher mobility. I'm Johannes Gehringer from the Higher Education Unit of DG EAC, Education, Youth, Sport and Culture and I'm dealing mainly with student and staff mobility within program countries and strategic partnership projects. So it's perfect. My competences fit perfectly into what you present today. I would like to sketch first the political context of teaching mobility and teacher mobility and present you a snapshot of where we stand with teacher mobility and teaching mobility in the current Erasmus Plus program, and also give you an outlook of what we have in mind for the future program that will start next year. So the political context is very new, very recent. You know that the Commission's main priorities are to support the green and digital transformations and transition towards a green digital Europe. And within this, of course, we are also adjusting our sectoral policies. Yeah, we have a vision to achieve the European education area by 2025. And there, teachers are key to achieve this vision. And at the same time, it's also very important that mobility is taking place, both to enhance the initial training and the continuous development opportunities of teachers. And yesterday was a very important day for higher education in this respect, because the Commission presented 3 major documents related to teacher and higher education. The communication on achieving the European education area, also the communication on the European research area, and it's also important to stress that the Commission really worked hard on establishing synergies between the 2 areas. And this is especially exemplified in the European University Initiative. And the other education-related initiative that was presented yesterday by our commissioners and vice presidents was the updated digital education plan. In both cases, teachers play a very important role. Teachers have one of the dimensions of the recent EEA communication. higher education is another dimension, especially in preparation of the transformation of higher education institutions to the university of the future. And it's also again stressed that to increase the quality of education and training, it's very important to support both the mobility of learners and staff and the cooperation activities. And in the digital education action plan, it's also very stressed that to build up digital education ecosystem, it's important that the educators, teachers and trainers also have the knowledge and skills to be able to use and take up digital tools and also to transmit digital skills. I would also like to mention that under the previous council presidency run by the Cocreation, one of the main topics was to enhance what we do at European level for teachers and trainers. And in May, the Ministers of Education adopted council conclusions on teachers and trainers in all education sectors, including higher education. And for higher education, the specific challenges were mentioned, highlighted. For example, that there is not enough focus on the entry qualifications of academic of the academic professions as regards appropriate teaching skills, as well as there is not a systemic systemic opportunities for continuous professional development for academic staff set up in many member states. And eventually, yes, there is a lack of support for interinstitutional staff development, including transnational teaching mobility. And so member states and the EU were invited to support higher education institutions in enhancing the competences of academic staff in this respect by applying research-based and student-centered learning and teaching, and also to recognize the value of teaching also as part of mobility, as part of their professional enhancement, advancement. So this was, in short, the higher education policy context regarding teaching mobility. So where do we stand today in the Erasmus program? I was trying to put together some statistics and also some findings from evaluation studies concerning staff mobility and specifically on teaching mobility. I can provide you with already more or less finalized data on the first 5 years of the current Erasmus Plus program on teaching mobility in higher education. So far, during these 5 years, the latest year, called 2018, we only have provisional figures because the data is still being compiled, and we will publish the annual report for Erasmus Plus soon. We have the program has supported almost 200,000 teaching mobilities, including in 5,000 invited enterprise staff from enterprises. There's more or less a gender balance. Well, you can see it fully. I guess let me just see if I can move my picture a little bit. You can see that there's more or less a gender balance with 47% female participation in teaching mobility and 53 male participation. In contrast to student mobility, it's Poland that is the most active country, and Polish teachers that go abroad, while the destination country, Spain, is #1 both for students and staff mobility. Let me just display a little bit.
Sorry, Johannes, there is a gray area on your slides. I don't know if
Yeah, really, okay.
if you can try to.
Where's the gray area?
Okay, now it's disappeared.
Okay, because I had to move the.
Yeah. Thank you.
The video. Can you see me, by the way?
Yeah. We can
Okay.
see. But
Yes.
now it's okay. There was.
Okay.
There was now this gray area. Okay, is on the right. But
yes, it's the.
yeah.
Well, it's the videos.
If you clap
you
the
can
panel,
see it.
Again, if you clap the panel, that will probably disappear. So do that, and then.
What should I do? Excuse me.
Clap. If you stand with your mouse on the panel, and
yes.
then on the left up corner, you click on that icon, then hopefully it will disappear, because it's kind of a shadow of the panel in your presentation.
Yeah. Okay.
That is what we can see.
On the left, I don't see. Here, it's the hide the thumbnail video.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Hide it.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, exactly.
Thank you.
Is it better? Yes. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah.
Okay. Good. Well, I wanted to show you the development of staff mobility, teaching mobility, and staff training mobility over the past 5 calls. You can see that, well, teaching mobility numbers are remained quite stable over these 5 calls, from 33,000 mobilities to going up to 37, while you can see a huge boost in terms of staff training mobility, which is more flexible. While recently we also introduced the possibility to combine teaching and training mobility, which also alleviates the number of fixed teaching hours that teachers abroad have to deliver. I wanted to show you, I looked at the figures in terms of numbers of higher education institutions participating in teaching mobility to see if there's room for increasing teaching mobility. As you could see, teaching mobility is more or less stable over the years, while we want to boost it. We know the benefits, and so I wanted to see. You can see, well, the STA stands for staff mobility for teaching mobility. You can see that the number of well, mobility projects involved in teaching mobility is rather stable over the years. I mean, and mobility projects are more or less the same as individual higher education institutions. On the other hand, the number of mobility projects that get funded and that well, contain student and staff mobilities increased from 3,600 to more than, well, to almost 4,200 mobility projects that include mostly individual higher education institutions, but also mobility consortia. When you compare it with staff training mobility, you could see that the number of higher education institutions increased quite substantially compared to teaching mobility. So the question is there a leeway that higher education institutions that provide fund staff training mobility, couldn't they also increase or have teaching mobility? On the other hand, if you look at the higher education institutions that are involved in student mobility for studies, which is a kind of the counterpart to teaching mobility, you can also see a flat curve pretty much. So the number of higher education institutions didn't really increase over time. Rather, the number of study mobilities organized and funded by those higher education institutions. So this is just a question I'm asking you. Well, I put it up for discussion. If there's not a leeway already, I mean, by increasing the number of higher education institutions involved in teaching mobility, that we boost teaching mobility. So some more figures. Most of the teaching mobility is done at bachelor level. You can see almost, yeah, roughly half of teaching mobilities. And the biggest education area is arts and humanities. The average teaching mobility is 5 days, and the EU grant amounts to 800 euros. So a little bit more than 100 euros per day, including travel and subsistence. Out of this almost 200,000 teaching mobilities, 64 teachers received a special needs support grant. And the general satisfaction with the teaching mobility is quite, I mean, it's almost 100%. So this was a little bit the snapshot. Just want to recall that in 2018, following a higher education agenda renewal, we which indicated that it's important to support the skills of staff, especially teachers, to better design curricula and also to increase their teaching skills. We introduced a priority in staff mobility for these two areas. And about a third of staff mobility was dedicated to these two skills areas. We also commissioned an impact study on Erasmus Plus higher education for student and staff mobility. I'll come to this in a moment. And I also wanted to point out that ACA, the Academic Cooperation Association, is about to do another evaluation study on the comparative analysis of staff mobility patterns for 9 countries. So what are the main findings of the impact study on higher education and staff mobility? First of all, higher education staff supported by Erasmus after their mobility became more innovative, for example, by using more innovative teaching methods or open educational resources following the mobility, and also cooperate more with the labor market than their peers. And they also gained acquired or improved their skills in terms of intercultural understanding and some transversal and social skills. And as well, while they were motivated in participating in staff mobility to enhance their professional advancement, but also to improve, to support institutional development. While the two main barriers to staff mobility, including teaching mobility, is related to family responsibilities and also work responsibilities, meaning that it's not easy to replace them when they are absent for a week or so. I also want to mention the contribution of K2 projects. As you know, of course, you are one of the project promoters to use the opportunity of strategic partnerships to create good practice. And it's very important to create good practice around the existing staff mobility rules. And I also want to recall that European university alliances are a test bed for not only student mobility, but also staff mobility. Especially, we just had a discussion before the meeting, and UNICA members are very active in European university alliances. Just want to say that two of the main pillars of European universities are the inter-university campuses that are created by the members of these alliances, so that students can move seamlessly from one country to the other and customize their learning program. But it's also important to stress here that in such programs and in such alliances, we shouldn't only have, there will not only be embedded structured student mobility, but also staff mobility. And academics, teachers are also part of the knowledge creating teams of students, teachers, researchers that tackle societal challenges through a challenge-based approach as part of the European university actions and alliances. So this brings me to the future, to the outlook of the future in terms of staff mobility and teaching mobility specifically. The objectives in designing the new program where that the program should be more inclusive and more accessible, more inclusive for disadvantaged participants with few opportunities, more accessible also to smaller higher education institutions, smaller organizations. More participatory, for example, by involving alumni, previous Erasmus Plus participants in actions. The program should also be more forward-looking by helping to develop forward-looking skills that we need in different areas like climate change, like artificial intelligence, the digital transition in general, the Green Deal. The new program should also become more international, with more international links to our partners worldwide, and eventually more digital with, as you know, the European Student Card initiative, and also simpler in terms of design. So we have gone through a co-creation process with many of you by having different working groups on mobility, on cooperation, on the charter. We also tackled staff mobility. For example, it was highlighted that we have to look into the quality and relevance of staff skills and staff mobility. For example, we have to focus more on the recognition of staff mobility, but also how to include all staff from all departments of higher education institutions. One idea that came up is that it's very important that we link teaching mobility, staff mobility, with the human resource development policy of the institution, but also to link up higher education institutions better through staff mobility and teaching mobility with the world of work. You can have a two-way approach that you invite staff from enterprises to teach and train students and staff at your institution, but also you can also send staff to companies and enterprises and other organizations outside, non-academic partners, to train. And eventually, blended staff mobility is also something that should be developed and is developed much more through projects, through practices, and through the support that we provide. It was also mentioned that staff training should also focus on the priority areas that are also sketched out in terms of digital and green transition, through better knowing the digital tools, innovative pedagogies, environmentally friendly practices in mobility, for example, to better support students in terms of recognition, for example, and to enhance intercultural communication and other transversal topics. So this brings me to my last slide, where I'd like to present you the future opportunities for staff mobility, and specifically teaching and teacher mobility. For staff mobility, for teaching and for training, as well, including for invited staff from enterprises, the core rules remain the same, but there will be a new feature. This is the international opening of the classic Erasmus scheme, what we call in our jargon K103. So that means that in order to enhance, to develop the skills of both students and staff in Europe, to enhance, to develop the capacity in program countries, we also fund, to a limited extent, mobility from students and staff from higher education institutions in program countries to partner countries. And where it's necessary to have to ensure this the outgoing mobility, for example, to partner higher education institutions worldwide, we also allow for incoming mobility where it's necessary to have a reciprocity in exchanges, for example, for students, so that European students don't have to pay tuition fees at top universities overseas. And how will it be organized? Just briefly, as part of the mobility project for student and staff mobility, well, let's say a part of the 20%, up to 20% of the mobility project budget can be used for international mobility for students and staff in the future. And since the allocation typically is based on past performance, we have a different funding mechanism than under the current K107 International Credit Mobility Scheme. But we will also add a new activity. That's the blended intensive programs. The blended intensive programs are a successor, a further development of what you knew as Erasmus intensive programs, as intensive study programs, but also staff training weeks, updated with the blended mobility scheme that already existed under K2, that has been implemented under K2. That means we fund the organization, the preparation, organization, and implementation of a program coordinated by one higher education institution, where partner higher education institutions send their students and staff to learn. So it can be both for student learners, but also staff learners. And this is a distributed funding and totally embedded in the current existing framework, so that we didn't have to come up with a separate project type. So I'll leave it at that for the moment. If you have any questions in detail, I can elaborate more. Yes, the floor is yours, please.
So thank you very much, Johannes. Very, very interesting. I mean, I'm sure there will be several questions. We already received some in the chat. We have a colleague that is asking actually to clarify a little bit the numbers in one of your slides.
Yes.
I don't know if you can go back to check the staff mobility data. Can you go still back? There was a slide in which the colleague.
Which one? Which number?
Yes, I think, yeah, this one. I asked the colleague if this is the one he was referring to, because he was a little bit concerned about the comparison between the staff mobility number and the student mobility numbers, because based on his experience, of course, the number of students, of course, moving is much higher than the number of professors, and he was a little bit concerned about this slide.
Here here we're talking about the number of higher education institutions, not the number of students here.
Okay.
Sorry, yes, to clarify.
Yes, I think this will clarify, but also I tell the colleague that the slides will be available. So, I mean, you will be able to check all the numbers presented more carefully, because you will have all the slides. Then I saw another question in the chat from another colleague, but actually that question can be maybe addressed a little bit later in the discussion, because the question was more about the recognition of the teaching staff activities by universities. And I guess that this question is not so much for you, Johannes, but for ourselves. Because
yes, yeah.
So I think it's a very relevant question, but I ask the colleague maybe to repeat this question in the chat later on, when the universities actually will have a panel on that, to see how we can actually encourage professors at our universities to go on mobility. We know that it has been very challenging. I also have a quite a good experience at my university. Sapienza is a large university in Italy. And of course, many colleagues, were saying, we are too busy, it's very difficult to do teaching mobility, 8 hours and this and that. I think the last slide that you presented with this blended opportunities foreseen for the new program will be very useful, because in the end, maybe to do a full course of 8 hours in 1 week, I think was challenging for our colleagues, because in the end you have to take, some of your time, maybe 1 week to do that. Instead, I think blended opportunities nowadays, I think, are really key in the new program. So I'm very happy to see this opportunity, because also the intensive programs were very successful. I also participated in some of them in the past, and I think it's very good to bring them back in a blended way.
And yes, we have to see how this new articulation will work in practice. But we are sure that since more than 4,000 higher education institutions receive annual funding through this classic Erasmus scheme, what is currently called K103, it's possible, yeah, to have to both fund the preparation of and the running of the program, because the idea is blended mobility requires a blended program, a teaching and learning program on the receiving end, while we still in the infancy stage, that such programs do not exist at the large scale. And this blended intensive programs activity wants to boost these new innovative curricula, and so that more of these curricula are created. And at the same time, we would also like to open the possibilities for students, if I may talk about students, that for different reasons cannot go abroad for 2 months or 3 months or semester, and that can only go abroad for like 2 weeks and do this in these intensive programs in a blended format, where you have, let's say, 1 or 2 weeks of physical activities, but accompanied by a virtual component of online learning and collaboration before and afterwards.
Thank you, Johannes. We have another question from Nathalie Regnault, but again is about recognition. I think again the recognition issue of teaching mobility is more in the hands, I think, of us universities.
Yes.
So again, this is a very good question again for one of the the next session of this event.
Yeah, it's because our rules are quite flexible, but it's the practices that you create around that is in your hands, and that's why the projects that we fund and that you are working on are so important to enhance this dimension.
Yes, yeah, we have another comment. Is not a question from Maura Heverin, saying, of course, that this is the virtual mobility of professors, of course, is environmentally friendly, and of course we all support that. I fully believe that in this tragedy of COVID, at least we have the disadvantage, that there was this digital push, and then I think that is useful for all of us. So this was more a comment, not a question. I have a general question for you, Johannes, related to this innovative pedagogies. This is also something we are discussing a lot, also in the European universities. How can we really target in a very precise way this issue in the new program? Because when you said, of course, that teaching staff mobility can be aimed at both teaching but also training, I think is really key. Nowadays to train, of course, the young professor, the young researchers, but also in a way the more senior staff members, because all the new technologies which recently changed so much, I think they require some update of the, in a way, of the skills of the teaching staff at our university. So how can the new program target this problem?
Well, there will be different repositories and different platforms that we create. The digital education plan, action plan, also proposes to create a digital education hub. Already in the area of higher education, we had have the Open U project platform that is now called Bloom. That should be a repository of all the good practices and different resources that are available. So. And in addition, you have the resources from strategic partnerships that are available on the Erasmus Plus project results platform. and that should be reused and well, reused, even well, further developed, and of course used in practice.
Yes, thank you very much. Then there is a question about Brexit, but I think the situation is not clear. So I think that this is again is a very interesting question, but probably too early to ask the Commission to reply to that, because I think nobody knows. Am I correct? Johannes, you correct me?
Yes, yeah. Okay.
I'm wrong.
No comment.
No comment. I know. I help.
Please check the Commission's website on the latest state of play and or the other media.
Exactly, and also, I mean, it was interesting to see the differences. I mean, in the countries involved in teaching mobility compared to student mobility. We know that for student mobility, the leaders are Spain. I know if I'm correct, then followed by France and Italy, Germany, etc. So, yes. How can we explain these differences, and how can we, try to link again? For me, it's very important, I think, to link very much teaching mobility to student mobility. I mean, teaching mobility should be key in improving the quality of student mobility, as I said, in relationship to the better preparation of learning agreements. And how can you interpret that data?
Well, I don't really know why Poland is #1, but I could imagine, since there's, I mean, so far ahead of even of Germany, that there is it's a national initiative. I would think, because if you also look at the data of sending higher education institutions, sending teachers on teaching mobility, it's also the top spots are also occupied by Polish universities. So it's important for them, because it's always an initiative of the universities.
Yes.
As such, maybe there's a push as well. Maybe they feel that they get more out of staff mobility, of teaching mobility, than maybe through student mobility in comparison. Because typically we have an 80-20 share in terms of mobility numbers. 80% of the of all mobilities funded by K103 is student mobilities, and 20% staff mobilities. So yes, it's an interesting outlier, I would even say, compared to student mobility and compared to the size of the higher education sector. But I don't know what's behind it. I have never been desk officer for Poland. That's why I haven't dug into this more closely.
Thank you. And maybe we have another question from Kimberly Kushi regarding staff mobility in partner countries. Will it be included in KA103, or will it stay in KA107? This is a little bit technical. I don't know if this is something that, Johannes, you can help us to understand.
Yes. Well, K107, what is commonly called as international credit mobility, actually international credit and staff mobility, because staff mobility is half of the mobilities, will continue under the future program. But I would say the difference between the international opening in the future K103 and the approach in K107 is K103 is supporting the capacities in program countries, while K107 is more supporting the capacities of partner countries, like in terms of development of higher education institutions in partner countries, or the staff competences of partners. That's why for student mobility, it's clear that the priority is to send out European students from program countries to do traineeships worldwide, to study worldwide, and develop relevant skills that we need. The forward-looking skills I was talking about in the different areas, in IT, in climate change, in all the priority sectors where we have a lack of capacity, lack of skills in Europe. For staff, well, it's typically a bundle that top universities abroad when they enter into interinstitutional agreements with European universities, European higher education institutions, they will they will have a bundle of exchanges of students and stuff, I would say. And as I said, typically, well, priority is outgoing mobility to partner countries, but in exceptional cases, we also can fund incoming mobility if there is a need for reciprocity. It also concerns staff mobility, but the bulk of international mobility will be outgoing from, well, program countries, Europe to the world.
So thank you very much, Johannes. Now it's time to proceed. I really appreciated your time for the excellent presentation and also